Welcome everyone to Friday Night Young at Heart, featuring nursery rhymes, stories, songs, poems, Mother Goose, Aesop's fables, Lewis Carroll, limericks, larks, epics, stories of the great operas, and such, to keep us all young at heart. I'm Father James DeLucio here, back in the library of the Paulist Fathers Rectory here in New York City. Tonight's story is an obscure Grimm's fairy tale. Why not? We need to hear new things from time to time. This story is entitled The Three Languages, and if any of you have ever heard this one before, raise your hand. Well, or put it in the commentary. I can't see you raising your hand. Okay. Thanks. Okay, this story takes place in Switzerland, of all places. And I don't know why that's particularly important, but the story does say a count in Switzerland. He had a son who was, well, let's just say he was not very smart. And the father is extremely frustrated with the poor kid. And when he grows into a man, the father has had enough. He says, I have tried everything to get you to learn, but you're stupid, kid. I'm going to have you live with the professor in our town, and you're going to stay with him for an entire year, and you better come back with some real knowledge and learning. So he sends him out, and at the end of the year, the young man comes back. Now, my son, tell me, what have you learned? I have learned, Father, to speak the language of dogs. What? The language of dogs? Get thee to the next town, and you will stay there. I will pay the professor there to take you in for an entire year, and you better come back with some decent learning. And so it happens, and at the end of the year he comes back, and he is asked by his father, now tell me, my son, what have you learned? Father, I have learned the language of birds. The language of birds? Get thee across the country. There's a professor there that I know, and I will send you to him. And you come back in a year's time, and you better have learned something worthwhile, or you will no longer be my son. And so he goes off, and then he comes back, maybe to Geneva. They don't tell us, but we're talking Switzerland now, so he has to go over the Alps and stuff. These are treacherous journeys. Who knows how long it takes him? At any rate, he does stay a year with the professor, probably not counting the travel time, but maybe. Our story doesn't say. And when he comes back, and the father says, now, son, what have you learned? Father, I have learned the language of frogs. That's it! The father tells the servants to take the young man out into the woods and kill him. So the servants do take him out into the woods to kill him, but for pity's sake, they can't kill him. So they send him off on his way. They kill an animal. Like in so many stories, you probably know which ones, where an animal is killed and then the evidence of body parts are brought to the wicked queen, or in this case, the wicked father, impatient father, the stupid father, to satisfy their ire. So he goes walking along. And what happens then? Wouldn't you like to know? Perhaps I should stop here. No, all right, I'm going to continue because it's not very long. So as he's going along, he comes to a castle, and he asks, can he have a night's lodging at this castle, for the weather was foul. Now, you know many stories where someone raps on the door of a castle at night and asks for lodging and a little bit of broth and is refused. But in this case, the lord of the castle says, you can't stay here, but we have a tower there in the back. You can stay there if you dare. If I dare, said the young man. Indeed, because it is filled with wild dogs, and they bark incessantly. I don't know how you're going to get a night's sleep. And besides that, we've had to feed a man to them every night, because they won't shut up until they devour him. And that man may be you. But at the risk of your own life, you may have lodging in the tower. Well, the young man isn't very bright and very courageous, or foolishly so. So he goes to the tower. Well, lo and behold, he knows the language of dogs. And he speaks to the dogs, and they tell him what their problem is, and why they're so hungry, and why they're stuck in the tower. They have been enchanted, and they can't leave, and they've been meant to devour. But no one knows how to break the spell. But they could tell him if he wanted to know. And of course he did. All he had to do was to dig up a chest of gold that was hidden in the base of the tower, underground, you know, and return it to the castle's owner, and there'd be some money in it for himself as well, and then they'd be free. Well, he, of course, does this, returns the chest of gold, gets quite a bit for himself, and off he goes. And then as he's traveling along, he comes to a pond that is filled with frogs, and he chats with them. They tell him something that makes him very, almost alarmed and a bit sad. But all the same, he goes on, and he follows the advice of the frogs that it is his destiny to go to Rome. So over the Alps into Italy, and well, it wasn't Italy then, you know, when these Grimm fairy tales were written. It's part of Austria-Hungary and a whole bunch of other things. But at any rate, he goes. Rome is still Rome. And when he gets there, lo and behold, the Pope has died. And so he's there with all the mourners about the Pope. And the College of Cardinals is looking for someone who's humble, a kind of diamond in the rough, if you will. But they're insisting that there has to be a miracle in order to decide who should be. So they call in all these eligible young men. Sorry, ladies. And while they're all there and about to be interviewed, 2 doves come fluttering down and on his shoulders. Well, now the cardinals are focused all upon our young man, because certainly a sign similar to that of the Holy Spirit descending upon the Lord on his baptism. But now 2 doves, white doves, yes, white. So they're interested. And then when they ask him these theological questions about faith and values and morals, of course, the birds let him know. And there we have it. The young man who's learned 3 languages, disowned by his father, goes on his way, and with the knowledge and the language of dogs and frogs and birds, he himself becomes the Pope. Now, do you think there's any influence on the tales of Saint Francis that had something to do with this story? Do you think that there's a moral here? Maybe, or maybe not, but I leave that to you and for your 4th of July weekend enjoyment to ponder. Offer comments. You rarely do.